First item on the agenda. Hello. First item on the agenda is a review and approval of the minutes from September 18. Can I get a motion on the minutes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the minutes of September 18th as written with some minor clerical corrections.
Is there a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. I'll turn it right over to Scott to begin tonight's presentation. Scott.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of our presentation tonight, and our overall presentation shouldn't be too terribly lengthy, but a lot of it is LEED and sustainability and net zero. And we had an earlier subcommittee meeting with the sustainability subcommittee, and then we're going to do another meeting, which was a deeper dive, and we're going to do another meeting with them. So nothing we're going over requires a decision by them or by this committee. So for some of it, we're going to move through rather quickly because it will be coming back to you after they have a chance to absorb it more as well. We provided an update to the LEED scorecard for both the Hosmer and Cuniff to the Sustainability Subcommittee. If you look at the top right, we're currently at 58 points in the yes column for Hosmer, 14 in the question mark, and 38 in the no column. We want to push that yes column to around 65 to 67 points so that we have a buffer. Ultimately, the goal for LEED Gold would be 60 points, achieving 60 points, and as we've mentioned before, we need a little bit of a buffer. There are a few things that we do want to mention to the highlight to the building committee because they involve action by the town or they involve cost. And so I'm just going to quickly go through and highlight those. Again, not to go through the scorecard in detail. We're doing that with the subcommittee. But for example, if you go to water efficiency, we have 2 points in the question mark column that we really need to be able to move into the yes column, and that's going to require us to do a rainwater collection system in both the Cuniff and the Hosmer. We know that those systems are around $400,000 to $450,000 each, and they're currently not in the proposed project. So when it comes time to evaluate the reconciled design development cost estimates, we'll have those on a list of items for consideration by the committee because this becomes a fairly important point because it's not just the 2 points that we get here. Because this is a regional priority for New England and the Northeast, we get an additional regional priority point. So it's really 3 points, and you can see how that's significant that may ultimately be for the project. So we just wanted to highlight that we'll likely be coming back with more conversation around whether the Cuniff and the Hosmer should in fact include rainwater recycling, which essentially means all the rainwater that's coming down on the roof being collected, treated, and utilized in the restrooms within the building. A couple of other items I wanted to highlight would be under energy and atmosphere. You can see 2 points in the question mark column for demand response. This involves the town entering into an agreement with the local utility to shed some of the energy use during peak periods, which would be the summer. And we're going to be providing more information on this, but it will be important if we're going to continue to target LEED Gold for the town to enter into a demand response program with the local utility. So we'll be discussing that more in the future. It'll also be important, you can see an additional 2 points just below that in the green power and carbon offset column. That will require the town to purchase what's referred to as RECs, renewable energy credits. We have a quote. In fact, the document that you see that looks like this is an actual quote for renewable energy credits for both the Cuniff and the Hosmer. It's about $3,000 for the Cuniff. It's about $5,000 for the Hosmer. We're not asking for any kind of approval on those tonight, but just to give you a sense of what it would cost to get those 2 credits and also to be contributing to sustainability beyond the Hosmer and Cuniff campuses as a result of buying those credits. So it's certainly something, since we're on the border in terms of achieving the 60 points, that we're likely going to be recommending at some point. The other area I want to highlight, because it involves an owner decision, building committee, town decision at some point in time, is we will be recommending that town facilities, school facilities, the entity in charge of the buildings adopt a green cleaning program, and we'll be talking more about what that is. Essentially just means utilizing sustainable and green products to clean the building after its completion. And then the column down at the very bottom, in the question mark column that we need to push over to green, that I've highlighted with the arrow, is related to that rainwater collection system that I mentioned earlier. We get that point moved over into the yes column, in addition to the 2 points over here that we get moved over into the yes column as a result of having a rainwater collection system. Both the projects are very similar, so I'm not going to review the Cuniff in detail, but are there any questions? We're going to do another review of this with the subcommittee and give them a chance to ask more questions before we bring this back to the building committee again. But are there any questions related to the lead scorecard?
Any questions, Steve?
Can I just ask one quick one on the energy, optimized energy agreement? Is there any, equipment or things in the schools that would, really be seriously impacted by that? Isn't that the kind of thing where they can turn down your electricity if there's an over demand?
It appears that what they would ask the schools to do, and we'll have more information very soon, but it appears that what they would ask schools to do is approximately 8 days out of the summer, you would have to shed about 30% of your load at the Cuniff and the Hosmer. So it seems like a relatively small ask, but we just want to we're working with the local utility right now to confirm that. We want to make sure it really is that low impact.
Yeah, and because, obviously if it's just a matter of things maybe not being quite as robust, fine, but if it shuts down major systems, yeah, that's a
Sure.
problem.
Sure.
Paul?
Scott, are we talking about just like turning off lights and air conditioners, or are we talking about a generator taking over and taking us off the grid?
We're talking about just a manual reduction as a result of them requesting it. So we're not talking about them, at least based on the conversation so far, we're not talking about them being able to override your systems or take over your systems.
Okay, because I've had experience with one of these programs where we had enough generator power to go 90% of the building, and we would just go to generator power and come off the grid totally.
Yeah, nothing like that. That's impressive, but nothing like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I just, we have at work at the factory we work at, we have this agreement, and I think 2 days this summer, they turned off the air conditioning, from noon to 4. So it's,
You suffered.
yeah, you suffered, but we also have multiple tiers. We got an emergency generator. Sometimes they run the emergency generator too, for 4 hours, so. But it's it's almost, it's annoying, but it works.
Any other questions? Did you want to, you gotta speak into the mic. Sorry.
Alex Sieving, AI3. I just thought I'd chime in since there's a lot of people from Watertown here. I believe the Watertown Target participates in it, and I was shopping there on a very hot summer day, and I went in, and the lights were a little dimmer, the air was slightly less cool than I expected, but I thought, wow, this is a great way to prevent a brownout. So I was really impressed that one of your local businesses does it too.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Scott?
Alex then realized she was simply feeling a little faint, and that's the reason the lights were so dim. Let's see. So we also are evaluating net zero for both the Cuniff and the Hosmer, as the committee is fully aware. And tonight we wanted to show you the order of magnitude that will be required in order to get each of those buildings to net zero. And by order of magnitude, we're primarily talking about the amount of PV area, photovoltaic panel area that would be required. So for example, this is the Hosmer site, and although it's very faint because we're trying to emphasize the panels, you can see the existing Z-shaped building here. The black outline is the newly proposed Hosmer. Large area is the field. And these are the proposed new parking areas at the Hosmer, new parking area along here. And in order to get to a large enough PV array to offset the entire building energy use, we're going to need about a 750 kW array, which means this much on the, and we've broken it down by the building and the site. The building itself is about 350 kW that you see located on the building, and they're divided up into individual panels, so it's a total of just over 2,100 panels, with 916 panels being on the roof, and then just over 1,200 panels being on the site. And we know that as we move through design, we may be adjusting the exact location of these and breaking some of them apart, et cetera. But we did want to present to the building committee that it is going to take this order of magnitude, because this 750 kW array is going to produce just under 1 million kilowatt hours of energy per year, and that's what the Hosmer is projected to utilize. We talked with the subcommittee about the fact that that's considered a very low energy use for a building of this size, likely lower than any school in the Commonwealth that will open at the same time, and certainly anything that's built now. So the building's super efficient, but that still means it'll use about 1 million kWh per year, and it'll take about a 750 kW array on that site. And so those would come in the form, we should talk about Cuniff a little bit first. This is the same site diagram on Cuniff, giving you a sense of the size of the array that would be required in the parking area, and then the size of the array that would be required on the roof. This is about a 500 kW array that you see depicted, both combination of the site and the roof. Now, it turns out a 500 kW array will produce almost 750 kilowatt hours per year, and that is more than what the Cuniff needs, so we would ultimately be scaling likely the parking areas, the site canopies down some, but just to give you a sense of order of magnitude, size, scale, et cetera, of what it would be at 500 kW on the Cuniff site. These are not unattractive, by the way. They can be very attractive structures, so we're just showing some images of what they might possibly look like. This happens to be a wood-supported canopy, steel canopy, a large steel canopy with a double cantilever, single cantilever canopy. So they come in a lot of different types. And so when we're talking about those PV arrays on the site, we're talking about that kind of canopy. That's a quick overview. As I said, we're taking a deeper dive with the subcommittee at the next meeting. So, but certainly any questions that the committee might have.
Questions from the committee? John?
Question, actually, Scott, maybe just want to do that one correction on the Hosmer.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
That number's
Yep.
wrong.
Yep.
You wanna just
On
mention
the
that?
Hosmer, there's a incorrect number right here. This 750 kW array produces just under 1 million. It almost identically matches the amount of proposed use for Hosmer. The 2.5 million is incorrect. The 750 kW array produces just under 1 million, or approximately the equivalent of what Hosmer would utilize per year. And we did include as a handout for you to take a look at your leisure, an analysis that shows both the detailed breakdown of that energy use at Hosmer, meaning it breaks it down by the amount that's dedicated to lights in the building, the amount that's dedicated to heat in the building, ventilation fans, site lighting. So there is a breakdown in your handout that details that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a question. Are the arrays, the solar panels themselves, different on the building versus on the canopy, or they're the same?
They're the same. They're the same size panel, they're the same 350-watt panel.
Paul?
Scott, from my experience with the parking canopies, they might be a little bit of a plowing challenge, but not much, but the teachers love them. They think it's the greatest thing, because they're undercover when it's raining, when it's snowing, getting in and out of their vehicles. It was a big plus. We did it in South High in Newton. It was a good project.
Tom?
Does it cost us losing any parking spaces, and is the overall cost already in the budget, or is it additional too?
They would be arranged so that they didn't displace any parking spaces. We believe that's possible. And the way the schematic budget was set up, there was a line item for green energy, sustainability, and photovoltaics, and that's still presumed to be in the overall budget. So it was built into that. We're obviously going to be taking a detailed look at the updated cost estimating round very soon with the building committee, and we'll see the value of it as a line item in there, along with the value of the construction of the buildings.
Vivian?
So it's not, excuse me for my lack of voice, it is not currently in the design documents, but we'll still be holding a line item that is still from the past used in the schematic design portion.
Any other questions? Leo?
Scott, just so I understand, this is a town-financed solar array, is that right? Or are we partnering with somebody?
The assumption so far has been that it would be town financed. Early on, a long time ago, there was some discussion about, a possible PPA, power purchase agreement, or some kind of cost sharing, but the assumption right now is that the town would want to reap all the direct benefits of the PV.
So maintenance, upgrades, failure over time, replacement, that's all on the town for this?
It would be, assuming that we continue on a path where they're incorporated into the construction of the project and paid for as part of the project budget.
Great, thanks.
Steve?
I was just going to add on to that, if we are going to try to get to net zero, that's an important distinction, and if there was a PPA, we wouldn't get as much benefit from it, and.
Absolutely, I completely agree. I think we maximize our benefit by owning the array. It's just the maintenance over time, and then the failure of PV panels over 15-year, 20-year lifespan. We just have to, as a committee, understand what we're committing to.
I'm just gonna, where the proposed site arrays are, there are some large mature trees, some on
Yes,
town
yep.
property, some on abutting property.
That's
So
right.
I'm just wondering, is that sort of the next step analysis of,
It is the next step. On both Hosmer and the Cuniff, more so on the Hosmer than on the Cuniff, some of the panels are in tree canopies where they wouldn't be particularly efficient. And so on the Cuniff, it's fairly easy to scale those back because it's a larger array as drawn than is required. On the Hosmer, it's going to take some evaluation of alternative locations where we could place those arrays and still get the benefit. We know that we may want to utilize them, for example, in lieu of canvas canopies for shading at the playgrounds. We may want to use some PV canopies for shading over some of the playgrounds, but we know we have to take a look at adjustments to a few locations where they're not particularly efficient because of the tree canopies.
okay, and then just one last thing is, we talked a lot about preserving the view from Mount Auburn Street of the Brigham House. And one of these large canopies is supposed to go right along the front of the Brigham House. Have you modeled how that's going to affect the aesthetics of the view?
We definitely would be able to show you that when we know what the design type is in terms of the kind of canopy, and then a little bit more about the size and magnitude.
Anything else, John?
I guess kind of two questions. One would, back on the discussion, which I know very little about, but you're talking about whether you do some kind of contract with some outside provider. You can, I suppose that's a way that you don't carry the cost yourself, but you arrange a deal with somebody else who's going to pay for it, but they get the benefit over a period of time, correct? Something of
Yes,
that nature?
they essentially, greatly oversimplifying it, but they pay for the PV array, but they get the benefit of the power that's produced by it.
Okay. I mean, the building itself could still be considered a net zero building, correct? I mean, it doesn't change that. I mean, the energy, that's energy use. It doesn't, to say it's a net zero building is around energy use, not
Yep.
kind of who owns the energy per se.
The,
Or am I wrong on that?
Yep, no, the way we have defined it thus far, and, not trying to wordsmith it, but the way we have defined it so far is that on-site, there would be an amount of energy produced, alternative energy produced, that would be equivalent to the amount of energy that the building is consuming. So, yes.
And then, I guess the other question, is it the case that, that in a way, we're looking at these two buildings separately, but they could be considered together in the sense that, if it's easier to generate through solar at the Cuniff than it is at the Hosmer, maybe there could be more generated at the Cuniff, which could kind of, quote, count against what was being used at the Hosmer? Or is that not the way you would look at it?
I mean, I think that you could look at it that way from a town perspective, from the perspective of how net zero is typically defined. It's generally site-specific, but I suppose you could define it any way you wanted to, as you're balancing off the two, since the town owns both sites.
Any other questions from the committee? Brian?
Brian Habeisen, Worcester Street, and a member of the Energy Efficiency and Environment Committee. One quick point I wanted to make in terms of if the town did do a power purchase agreement, what often is done is that the site owner can be the purchaser of the energy. So that's a way that you can basically get the you can have somebody actually be a third-party owner of the system, but you can actually buy the energy, and actually you can often get it for a cheaper rate than what you pay for your regular electricity rate as well, which is what we're doing with the DPW, as a matter of fact. So that's one way to look at a power purchase agreement, and there's pros and cons for that. Financially, they can get tax credits the town cannot for the array, but it wouldn't be owned by the town. You could eventually own it, but it may take 15 years before the array would return to the town. So there's pros and cons, not a clear winner or loser for that, but things to consider. I also just want to make a general comment, if I may, in terms of the presentation that Scott made earlier to the subcommittee, the lead and the net zero presentation. I just wanted to say that I think both the lead and the net zero analysis he's doing is coming along really well, and I, as a member of the environmental community, I would just like to say that I'm very impressed with what his firm has done with the lead analysis. So not just that they have a lot of points for lead, but the way that they're doing the analysis. So when they have shown points that have not been able to be achieved, they've done a very detailed analysis of why they haven't been achieved. And all I've personally asked for was when something couldn't be done, just a good explanation why. And he's certainly done very well explanations of the reason why particular things can't be done. And so I think that's good. And I also think that looking at the points and doing things for the right reason rather than just trying to get a point to get a point, I think that's really good as well. And so far, I'm really impressed with what's been done. I think we need to look at how things come out with the cost figures that are coming out soon and how things come out with that. But generally speaking, I'm really impressed with the way things are done, and kudos to the team for that.
Thank you. Anyone else? Scott, go ahead.
Just very quickly, we had a really super good meeting with DPW. Lori joined us, Steve joined us. I'm probably forgetting somebody, but to discuss playgrounds. Peter joined us. Is Peter here tonight? Yeah, Peter joined us. And it was essentially just to talk about anything related to the playgrounds and get a lot more information. But we did walk through with them all the playground locations, and then we walked through with them objectives related to universal design, some of the comments that we heard from the public and the committee about incorporating some unique elements into the playgrounds. And they had some good ideas. Our team had some good ideas. We talked about the way they're maintained and the ease of maintenance and some preferences with regard to equipment and surfaces. It was a really great discussion. We talked about the sensory materials and the need for different textures throughout the playgrounds. And we found that Watertown does an excellent job really being thoughtful in the way their playgrounds are done and staying current on what's available and what the current trends are, et cetera. So a great discussion that we were able to have around all the playgrounds and get their input. And what we essentially agreed to do is a lot more design work on each of those and getting much more specific about some equipment based on and finishes and organization and fencing and surfacing based on their input, and then go back to that group and have another discussion and get their input again, and with the intent of coming back before the building committee with our proposed playground designs, updates, revisions that are reflective of the input of that group. So,
Scott, can, on the Lowell, I notice you just have the grades K, which is in the front. Town is considering doing the tot lot on the ball field part. Could we at least kind of include that and get some estimates? Because it would make sense that maybe we'd have the same type of equipment for all 3 elementary schools, instead of using a different vendor and designer.
sure. It would just be a matter of just letting us know, Tom, kind of scope, scale, exactly what you need from us. Just let us know.
Any other questions? John?
Just a quick one. Is the surface similar to the kind of surface that we've been using, the kind of rubberized surface?
That is the that poured rubberized surface is the preferred surface. It's the one that Watertown's had really good luck with maintaining. Yeah.
Second time. First time with the manual. Anyone else? Okay, Scott, continue.
Just a little bit of update, design update on the Hosmer and Cuniff. And I think for Julie, if you don't mind, for the Hosmer, I'm going to ask Julie Rahili from our office to just talk through these few slides.
So at the previous building committee meeting, we ran through a lot of the other spaces in the school, and we hadn't talked about student dining at all. So the design progress update for Hosmer tonight is purely on what's happening in that student dining space. And from all of the plans that we've seen, that exists. We don't have an overall plan here, but it exists sort of where the two academic wings collide at this corner with the athletic fields right to the bottom of the page here. And so we just wanted to show that that student dining space is large enough for 2 or more grades at a time for lunch, because of the option of the additional performance platform space. There's also, this is a 30-foot opening here, so that kind of provides a little bit of the scale and the magnitude of the space that we've allotted for student dining. We've also provided a dining alternative space, which was something that developed out of our programming meetings with staff and administration. And that's primarily serving some of the students who are a little overtaken with sensory overload during lunch, but don't want to be completely quartered off from the rest of the school. So providing some kind of balance between being a part of the student body and also being sort of having their private space. We've also included a storage space within student dining, and we aren't going to get into it tonight, but there was a little bit discussion in the sustainability subcommittee meeting on how if we chose to go the dishwash route, that maybe that space could be interchanged for providing the dishwash space that we would need. And then maintaining that symmetry in the space, we have the kitchen to the top here, and the kitchen would provide 2 service lines, so students would come in and have the point of sale right within the student dining area. There would also be a kitchen office, walk-in cooler, walk-in freezer, dry storage, and additional kind of cooking surfaces. And we have an enlargement of that. We've actually worked with a kitchen and food service consultant who's gone back and forth with the director of school nutrition in Watertown. So we've had some firsthand knowledge of the type of equipment that the district would want to include, as well as how to use it. And there's a list of equipment here that I won't bore you with, but essentially having that warming equipment also allows for a little bit more variety with the nutrition choices for lunch. So we've thought a lot about what to include in order to provide a variety of options for students within the Hosmer, but also across all 3 of the elementary schools.
Julie, can you hang on one second, Paul?
Sure.
Yeah, before we leave that view, Julie, just on the opposite side of the wall from the walk-in coolers and freezers,
Yes.
there's 3 circles. I'm guessing that those are recycle receptacles?
They are, yep.
So my suggestion would be is, and then below those are 2 drinking fountains.
Yes.
When the kids come up with their milk and their containers to empty them, they're going to be pouring them in the drinking fountain. So we found that if we put a little hand wash sink or even a slop sink of something that looks nice
Next to it.
between them, we won't get straws and milk and everything in the drinking fountains.
That's a really helpful point.
It's laid out great, and you'll have plumbing there, so I don't think
Right.
it'll be a big problem to
Yeah, that's
to
a
do
really
something
good
like that.
point. Yeah, and a little bit on those areas, we're thinking by having the 2 entries into the student dining that it allows for easy access from either academic wing, and then as students are sort of starting to queue up to get their lunch, they're maybe filling up as they go, or as they leave, dumping some of those recycling as they return to class.
Laurie?
Just to make sure that I understand, food deliveries and drop-off would come from the double doors that are above the dry storage, those double doors, and then go in those double doors around, right?
They would, yeah. We've also provided a door directly into the kitchen from that corridor.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
And then we don't show it on here, but or a little bit of, this is a purely staff toilet. So that would provide some services for the kitchen staff. And then a few perspectives of the space. This is as you walk in. So if your vantage point is kind of from that stage platform area, looking into the double height space, like many of the other spaces we've shown, we're maintaining a lot of natural light. We're exposing structure. The way the space itself is configured allows for a lot of variety with table and chair options. And we also can see the direct access to the outdoor dining from this view. And this is at the opposite corner, looking back towards that performance platform. We've also provided the kitchen with a overhead grill, so when it's not in use, it can be locked off. And then this is a view looking towards that group dining, alternative dining space. We are planning to have some sort of operable door, and we want to reach back out to the administration and get more information on how they're seeing the public versus private, or the amount of connection that we want that space to have to the larger dining space. And then this is just a view showing that if we do incorporate an operable wall there, then after hours, or if there's some sort of special event, we're not losing that space to the rest of the dining area. And then this is just an additional view looking back into that space, which would also be really great for meeting space or during events, just to have an additional sort of conference or gathering space. And then we're also maintaining that transparency and connections into the academic wing, just to keep it a little bit keep it fun in that academic zone on the second and third floors.
Questions? Leo?
Reading the rendering correctly, the performance platform space is a single height space?
It is.
And is the headroom condensed due to the step up for the stage?
Slightly. We didn't want to, so we're showing two sort of lower steps there, primarily just so that if the dining space required additional seating, or if they wanted to use that during the day just for kids to eat at as well, that it wouldn't seem so separate from the dining space.
Roughly, what do you think the headroom clearance is there?
Oh, from the stage to the
Stage to
ceiling there?
To the drop ceiling?
Probably 9 feet.
9 feet? Oh, okay.
Kelly?
On the interior perspective for the student dining, for the ceiling materials, so you're calling for the baffles, is it just at that front perimeter?
It is.
Okay. What material is that? What product?
So we've been referencing the Armstrong acoustic blades, soundscape blades.
Okay.
We are interested in using them in a similar manner at the other sort of featured corner spaces of the building.
Okay. And so then you've got the, hold on, what perspective was it? The acoustical ceiling radiating from the performance corner. And then is there a reason why we're not just continuing that and it's stopping at baffles? Just curious.
Sure. So this space in particular, given its sort of kite shape, makes it a little difficult just to have kind of the geometries work out and providing some additional just interest in the ceiling so that it's not one continuous plane. So we have found in our ceiling plan that using sort of a series of these larger clouds, but also done in a radial pattern, sort of fits that kite-shaped space nicely.
Okay. It might just be the rendering, it just looks just
It does
a little
look
bit clunky.
a little funny in this view, yeah.
Right.
Anyone else? Any?
So is the design criteria, we're going to have, each elementary school is going to have a full-service kitchen to prepare all the food, instead of having food prepared centrally and brought to each of the three schools?
It's
I don't
not,
know, maybe that's, I
it's
just don't
not,
know.
it's not a full-service kitchen, but it includes significantly more accommodations than the schools have now, so that they can do, as Julie mentioned, a much wider array of nutrition options, and have the ability to literally serve anything, but they're not quite full-service kitchens at any one of the elementary schools.
Okay, so I guess maybe that's just from an operations standpoint, so the food deliveries from the wholesale suppliers is going to come to each of the
Still
three
come to
schools?
each of them, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Anyone from the public? Leo?
Regarding the performance space again, at that height, do you think that there could be an alternate program function for some of the depth there? It just seems that the height to depth ratio of that space is really deep. and not very high, and I don't think you're getting out of it because of the corridor routing above, right? So we can't up that space. Does it need to be that deep, or do we need to provide both ramped conditions on both sides?
We don't need to provide both ramps. We were just trying to maintain the symmetry, but we were also thinking of the methods that they might use if they wanted to sort of choreograph a performance to provide that symmetry.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
We definitely could look into alternatives to make that ceiling and that space appear less reduced. Something we are trying to, because of the location of that corner where the structure's meeting, it's a little messy up there, given the nature of the angle. So we were trying to maintain a ceiling there just so that it cleaned it up. But we could definitely look at alternatives to something there that would provide a little bit more head height.
Yeah, perhaps even just raising it to your structural engineer that they need to be aware, perhaps so they can slim up the structure a little bit in that zone.
Sure.
Great, thanks.
Or maybe even reduce it from 2 steps to 1,
Right,
lower
yeah.
the floor a little bit.
I know the Cuniff performance space only has 1 step, so we might
And
follow
for those who are familiar with the Cuniff, is that effective, or is it better to have children up slightly higher? I don't know. I'm asking. Is it good with 1, or is 2 better?
I would just say that what we've witnessed at the Cuniff, it's not just the Cuniff, it's all elementary schools really, is that space is utilized so little, that so-called performance space is utilized so little, and it's not utilized for a super high level of performance where acousticals and height and all those things are super important. So my point is, we're really trying hard at both the Cuniff and the Hosmer to truly make that easily accessible for dining, so that the majority of the time it's not just an empty space there. So for that reason, Cuniff only has 1 step, and then for that reason, we've tried to keep the Hosmer down low as well, so it's more accessible that way.
So just in follow-up to that, I'm applauding your dining alternative option. I think it's wonderful. As a parent with a child who deals with some overstimulation things, I understand exactly what you're talking about. But the depth of this performance platform, you're committing a certain amount of storage area to the dining alternative, whereas I think perhaps you may not need all of that, but we can talk about that offline.
It's a fair point that if the performance area doesn't necessarily need that kind of depth, we can make some trade-offs there with the space. And any other questions on the Hosmer? I think I'll ask, in following suit, I think I'll ask Mike to chat a little bit about the kind of slides.
Thank you. So similar to Hosmer, the Cuniff slides will be focusing on the student dining in the kitchen. But in addition, we'll have a slide or 2 on the exterior, just to show another angle of the west elevation. To help get you oriented, or to remind you, the student dining is going to be on the first floor in what we're deeming as Zone 1. You could see it in the key plan on the top left of the slides. It's highlighted with that orange rectangle. So some of the features we wanted to call out was, again, the capacity. The Cuniff student dining also has the capacity to comfortably fit 2+ grades at a time. If you look closely, it's actually not too bad. The tables, even though it's an early, just a loose fitting, the final design would have a larger configuration and different size tables, which would inevitably give you more seating options. What you're seeing right now is about 120 chairs. And that's not including the performance platform, which, again, we said could double as more seating area. That square footage is, that could probably accommodate another, say, 30 to 50 students if you wanted. To piggyback on what Julie was mentioning about the ramp and the stage, and the step, excuse me. Another reason why Cuniff chose to utilize one step rather than 2 or 3 was because of the way the building was set up. It made more sense to have the ramp oriented north-south plan, north-south, as we have shown, which one of the only ways to achieve that was to minimize the length, which in turn minimized the height of the platform. Some other features we wanted to call out were the projection screen that we equipped the performance platform with. So when the student dining and performance platform isn't being used for dining purposes or performances, we're going to have the ability to, and someone mentioned it last building committee meeting, what the curvy thing was in the floor plan. That would be the soffit that holds the ceiling flush-mounted projection screen. Some other items that I wanted to point out too was just the adjacencies of the space. A lot of the staff mentioned their before and after school programs, so we wanted to call out how it is adjacent to the gymnasium, which is used frequently before and after school. It's adjacent to the rear lobby, which in turn is adjacent to the rear playground and play field and rear half-court basketball court. And the other thing we wanted to point out on the floor plan specifically was the adjacencies to the recycle and trash room and how close those two operations would be to one another. And we will cover more of the kitchen in the next slide. Again, similar to what was mentioned in Hosmer already, our consultant from Crabtree McGrath was talking directly with Brandon Rabbit, the director, to confirm that we will have the right equipment and program spaces to meet any serving needs that the schools are requesting. Again, a walk-in cooler, a freezer, an office, dry storage, et cetera. And to Lori's point, I did want to bring up the path, which would be this orange right here, would be the path for any deliveries. It's important to note as well, is directly left of this screen, directly left of these double doors here, that would be the custodial suite. The reason why the food wouldn't be coming through that door is just best practice to not mix a maintenance delivery with food delivery, but also because we like the idea of having more of a straight shot for the kitchen needs. Oops, sorry. And then the features on the left remain the same, but I just wanted to show some elevations of the space before I hopped into any perspectives. Following suit with the general theme of the building, with the opportunity for educational signage, the opportunity to express more structure, the safety and security with the overhead coiling grills, the opportunity for any wall graphics, and adopting any aesthetic that would have wood panels or acoustic panels to that nature. And then you could see on the bottom left, that would be a view looking at the performance platform, so the large expanse of glass welcoming a lot of natural daylight. I know I'm just going really quickly, so if anyone has any questions, I could pause.
Anyone have questions at this point? Continue on.
This next slide is just another detailed look of some of the, I guess, behind-the-scenes development that takes place, just coordinating with structural, mechanical, signage, et cetera, et cetera. This is just showing the recycling station and how we can integrate that within the structure rather than trying to build a round structure. And then also the opportunities that it may have for educational signage or any sort of branding. This is usually a high priority detail to uncover earlier on, just for the trash room and recycle room, to make sure that it would actually fit the used trash containers. And then looking at some perspectives, this is a perspective standing from the rear lobby looking towards the kitchen. Again, I won't repeat the features as much, but you could see the safety, security, structure, et cetera. And this is the only one I will call out, is that would be the curvy thing on the wall that, again, someone brought up. That would be the concealed projection screen. And then this would be standing from the kitchen looking towards the rear lobby. You see the ADA ramp on the right, You see more opportunity for structure or graphics to be expressed. And one main visual that we should point out here too is just the transparency to this lobby and the, I guess, the visual of how we can connect these two floors, the first and second, having the open stair. Some of the finishes that we're showing here to enhance the space rather than having the wall-to-wall ceilings would be ceiling clouds and some open grid clouds just to have some pops of color. Should I wait?
Anyone have questions on the kitchen at this point? John?
Just kind of generally, if, right now the kitchen has what, kind of like 3 sinks in it? That's what the Hosmer had
Yep.
anyway.
Yep.
It's kind of a
That's
configuration.
pretty standard. It's wash, rinse, dry, or
Right.
soak, wash, rinse.
Right.
Yep.
And if we were to go, which we talked a
There you
little
go.
bit about at the subcommittee, if you go to a more extensive washing component of trays or whatever else, would that be able to fit in some fashion in there, or are you going to have to kind of redesign that kitchen?
There would be some redesign, but to my understanding, and please jump in, those sinks would remain as part of just a health standard to begin with, but the dishwasher itself would have its own separate room. Did that answer
It's
it?
about a 10 by 14 room that would be required to accommodate dishwash. We'd have to find additional square footage somewhere in that layout.
Leo?
Is there any benefit to visual control from the kitchen office, either into the kitchen proper or out into the main student dining area? Or both?
For the scale of the kitchen, I would argue no. The kitchen office is remotely located within the kitchen.
And
And
it's
typically,
typically
they don't have,
just kind of a isolated office?
more or less, yeah. And typically, they wouldn't have oversight of the student body. That would be
That was a question I had for the Hosmer as well, by the way, because you have the option of viewing into both from the kitchen location in the Hosmer. Okay, and then, again, regarding the performance space, are you thinking curtains on the windows there?
We were thinking shades on the windows and
Okay.
an additional curtain to
Yeah,
help
'cause
black it
the
out.
backlighting will probably be pretty strong, but the option to close those down would help the performance, I think.
We would propose a continuous rear traveler along that backside to make sure that you could pull a complete curtain all around those windows
Yep.
in the event of a performance.
Yeah, I'm so glad there are windows there, because I think it, you know, the building aesthetically benefits from the outside, but clearly the daylight to that space will be wonderful when there's not a performance on.
Vivian?
Is the intent to use this performing center also as an alternative dining area?
Yes, but also the staff at Conniff mentioned that their program is set up now to take many students into the admin suite. They prefer more, not isolation, but more separation. But yes, the intent would be to utilize that as,
Okay, because if the intent was to do that, there is no real separation
Right.
buffer
other than
to
the
protect
elevation.
those students from the,
Yep.
stimulations.
Yep.
Yeah, just to clarify, I thought by alternative dining you meant broader dining option, but if you're referring to like the alternative dining from Hosmer, Conniff, because of the smaller population, operates a little bit differently, and they have that, as Mike pointed out, they have that student body in the guidance area often for dining versus creating an alternative area in the dining area.
And that's how they wanted to continue to proceed?
Correct.
While we're on this plan, I just wanted to point out too, when the curtain at the performance platform, the squiggly line here, when it's not in use, we're designing a nice little pocket for it to be concealed with. So when it is open, theoretically, you won't see it at all.
Any other questions? Continue.
And then I just wanted to bring this slide back. This was from the last building committee. This was mainly just to remind you the material palette, the high-density cladding, the ACM panels, and the stone veneer in the base. That'd be important for the next slide. This is another angle of the west elevation. Previously, we've shown a sharper angle, so you couldn't see much of the elevation. So the importance of this slide was just to show the rhythm and the harmony between the east and west elevation and how the material palette will work on both sides.
Leo?
I just want to reiterate my concern about the material choice of the aluminum specifically. The rendering is representing what I think is probably accurate, but this will be very bright, kind of specular aluminum, which will, bounce a lot of light as well, so I'm just reiterating.
It's also important to note, too, just for this simple perspective, there are a handful of trees along this path in the cemetery. Not to sway anyone, but that was all from kind of.
Question, Kelly?
Can you just speak to the railing on the roof? Is there a way to set that back so it's not as visible? I mean, I'm assuming we need it because we're going to have some PVs and it's going to need access, but if we're not going to do a parapet, that could be quite an eyesore, so we might want to just bring that back a little bit.
One strategy that we typically take, too, is to paint it white. This is black at the moment, but when we paint it white or a sky blue, it tends to blend as well.
Yeah, even on the rendering, it just isn't reading great, but just something to consider what the view would be from the street.
Okay.
John?
I just want to follow up on Leo's point. I'm not sure, wasn't clear about the metal issue that you were raising. You want to clarify that, or I'm not, on the back side or the front side or both?
It simply has to do with the tonal palette that you're compiling here. I've asked Scott and his team about the wood tones and the metal tones, and I don't know if we've landed specifically, but the metal example that was circulated is almost like a true anodized aluminum. And I don't want to put words into your mouth, Scott, but please, if I say anything that's not accurate, please just correct me. But my understanding is that it's a very kind of bright, true aluminum color, and so that metal will bounce light and be reflective. And so there's certain things that could be toned down, including the color of that metal, right, to come more in line with the naturalistic tones of the wood. And that's all my comment is about, really. It's just about, where are we going with the tone of the metal, with the color of the metal, and the reflectivity of the metal. And, I think a large volume that has wood cladding on it in interstitial elements, but the primary body is a very kind of reflective body. I just want to be aware of it.
And those are the areas that are, cover for the top, the height of the building. I mean, they're in that rendering, that drawing. I mean, they're pretty substantial in size.
They are. They're the areas that you see right here.
Right.
And we've circulated a variety of different samples. As Leo points out, we circulated some samples initially that had a fairly high reflectance that appeared very much like an anodized window frame or anodized door frame. The last time we circulated the samples of the aluminum composite material, we also included some that were toned down a bit and included some paint finishes that toned that surface down a little bit, sort of like Leo's describing. So I would say we haven't decided on a definitive finish for that particular area. And on something like that, we would eventually put together a real composite palette and select with the committee the actual material that the building is going to be, and then attempt to reflect that in a revised rendering too. So I think the point's well taken that there's a delicate balance there between trying to get that kind of contemporary feel and the contrast between the wood appearing cladding and the metal, without having too much contrast. It's like if you're painting inside your house. You always want that subtle complementing without the abrasive contrasting. So I think we appreciate the fact that there's some sensitivity to the exact finish and color on both of those materials.
Yeah, that's really all the comments about, just the opportunity to review the palette prior to committing. You know, we have a lot of anodized aluminum in our products today, but, you know, a consciousness as to what the palette is going to be long-term, I think, is required.
Are there any other questions from the committee? Maureen, please step up to the microphone.
I'm Maureen, and I live at 10 Winthrop Street. I asked Scott that question about the exterior metal way back when, and he said the durability or the long-lasting, what it's going to look like over a long period of time, he said the lighter metals will endure much better than the darker metals. Am I correct, Scott?
I don't.
Now, you got to go back about 18 meetings ago.
I don't recall. I mean, I know we've talked about the darker metals can absorb more heat, and the lighter ones.
We're talking about durability.
I think there might have been a situation where we had two products, and one was more durable than the other, and perhaps one was lighter and more reflective, but it wasn't necessarily longer lasting because of its finish. It may have been more about the composite of the material itself, because I think that you could get durability in the finish regardless of whether it's highly reflective or it becomes, you know, a slightly darker, more subtle color. I wouldn't necessarily say that that's going to determine that the maintenance or the durability would determine the level of reflectivity.
Because I was afraid that the building would look worn after 20 years. And you also said siding can also be removed and replaced.
That is true. I did say that siding can be removed and replaced. And we did talk about, with all of these materials, you know, their longer term durability. I mean, the expectation is a pretty significant lifespan for these materials, but that they could be removed and replaced at some point in time.
Okay, well.
As we get further along, we will be discussing all of these materials again and make decisions as a committee what direction we're going to go in. Yes, Anne Marie.
Hi, Anne Marie Clinton, Winthrop Street. So I'm restating a concern that I've had about the solar panels on both the roofs of the Hosmer as well as the Cuniff, because as we present this and we talk about materials and the railing, the visual for how they'll reflect after seeing these three and change the look of the building is still a question that I have. And I know you said you're going to research further, but.
No, I think that it is, we will show them. It's less of a concern for us now. I'm going to go back to, it's less of a concern for us now because as we've got the detailed engineering layouts, which will be adjusted, but as we've talked more about the engineering of the PVs on both Hosmer and Cuniff, at one point in time, we discussed the possibility of a very large framed array that might get significantly off the roof of the building. And I don't think we're going down that path anymore. It seems more efficient and more economical to break them up into the smaller arrays that you see here with walking pathways between them and making sure we don't get any shadowing across the arrays. And so for us, we now know that this is not going to come up as high as we had thought at one point in time. And we'll still be showing all of that, but I'm just mentioning that our attitude about them has changed significantly since we very first warned that they may be super significant elements on the Hosmer. We think they're going to be much more subtle elements. And we want to, as Kelly suggests, pull that railing back from the edge slightly anyway. So, for example, with some of these edge arrays, we may end up adjusting these so that they get pulled significantly back away from that roof edge. As you can imagine, if we decide that Mount Auburn Street is being a critical view requires us to pull that one array back. For us, it's going to be relatively low anyway, and it's not a big deal to pull it back a little bit further. And with Cuniff, the same thing. We've left ourselves room to adjust as we find the exact locations of the mechanical equipment, and we just don't think either one of those is going to be as high as we thought they were going to be at one point in time.
Okay, that was my concern after seeing these, and depending on which one you pick, if you align them, it would throw off the whole presentation, right?
Sure, yeah.
Not that I don't think you could consider that before, but thank you.
Steve?
Scott, going back to the Hosmer one with the array, another thought that just occurred to me is with the southern exposure, the Brigham House might significantly shade that structure, that canopy they have along the front of it. So that might not be very efficient anyway.
This one in the daylight and sunlight modeling, it only lost a small amount in the foot. We just gave you an abbreviated portion of the report, but in the report, it appears to do fairly well. These are the ones that we're going to have to reevaluate if we can break them down. And certainly anybody's input with regard to anywhere on the site where they think an array would better be placed is going to be helpful to us, because we are going to need to look for some alternative locations. For example, for these where we know these are not quite as efficient as they should be placed under the canopy of those, partial canopy of those trees.
One thought that just occurs to me is where you have the entryway, the roadway across the front of the building and the entrance, is there an opportunity for a canopy there? Just roadway and...
There certainly is, and we may want to do some of that for protection, for student protection and drop off. And
actually, I didn't mean there, I meant around to the east
this side, yeah, this side, yeah.
But either one.
Any other questions, Leo?
I just had one comment. In regards to the larger arrays that are shown, they'll clearly break down into sawtooth condition and only rise so high, correct? They're only rising single height, 15 feet or so?
Referring to the ones on the ground or on the building?
On the ground.
Yes.
Okay,
you are correct.
It's basically a comment in response to the concerns about blocking the Brigham House from Mount Auburn Street. You will see it at the ground level, but it doesn't significantly block the facade of the Brigham.
Correct. That is true.
Piggybacking on that, I just thought it would be nice to see updated renderings, site renderings with these, because there's a lot of them, and it's somewhat overwhelming, and not that I'm anti-PV, but it would just be good to see what that impact is. Just a first look, it seems like a lot, and I mean, whether we want to spend $2 million on site arrays, we can have that discussion later. If we can study that and just see what that would look like in a rendering, it'd be great. I had two other things just while I've got it. When we talk about material selections, I know that we'll obviously have physical samples, but it'd be great that if you guys could come with warranty information, life cycle costs, just so we can have a big picture discussion when we're finalizing that selection. I'm sure you're already planning to do that. And this is a minor comment, but I was noticing in the playground materials that you had sand. Is that being proposed?
We talked about it as an option, but it's not going to be utilized.
Have you heard of Joey's Park?
No, I have not.
They had a tremendous rat problem because they used sand, so please do not use sand.
Yeah. The rat problem didn't come up, but certainly it can be a challenging material to control otherwise.
Fantastic park. I haven't gone in 2 years because there's so many rats, so.
That's, just for the record, that's in Belmont, not Watertown.
That's a good point.
Let's not throw our neighbors under the bus.
Just looking at this, there's a parking lot on Concord Road on the south side of the building. And you can kind of see it better on maybe the right here. Right there where your cursor.
Yeah, Vinny, I think you're right here. Yep.
Yeah, so I just was wondering, if you had to rearrange some of the site arrays, would it make sense to put PV arrays over that parking lot?
It would. This very first pass was really more about giving you the order of magnitude and just a heads up that we're going to need to do some work to locate that much PV on the ground. And so we are going to be taking a look at alternative locations and breaking it up and breaking it down. We really just wanted to see, to scale, what a 750 kW array would look like and how much of it could fit on the roof, and then how much of it we're going to have to find accommodations for on the ground.
Anyone from the committee? Brian?
Seeing as how you have the additional cost of the racking for the site PV, have you considered looking at higher efficiency panels for the roof PV to minimize the site, since it's going to cost more to do the racking anyway for the site PV?
We've asked our engineer about that. I mean, we're assuming, I think he's assuming 350 watt panels right now for all of these. That's a pretty high efficiency panel. On like the MLK school in Cambridge, I know they used a really complex racking system that racked and automatically adjusted panels in their location, et cetera. He designed that system, and he's still not a fan of it. So right now, our thought is on the roof, we need to stick with low maintenance, easy to get to, not too overloaded, walkway paths, et cetera, and not go up any higher. The amount of additional that we could get up there wouldn't be that significant anyway, so we've kind of shied away from any kind of elaborate system on the roof so far.
Hi.
Pat Rathbone, Watertown. This is just a minor comment, Scott. I've been looking at a lot of designs of canopies and awnings, and it's just a hope that when you present these to us, you will pick out one or two that you think particularly well pick up the exterior design elements of the buildings, because I think that will make a huge difference in terms of how these, particularly the canopies, are perceived.
Sure. And I think all, and maybe I certainly should have said this, but I think that we're really trying to get not necessarily tonight, but by the next meeting, when we talk about this a little more, we're trying to get a sense from the building committee if there is a commitment to, if we're correct in assuming that there's a commitment to this level of PV, because we don't want to spend the town's money designing this and going down this path really far and then find out that there's no appetite for doing it. So in the next couple of meetings, we're trying to get a sense that the building committee is still committed to this path. So one of the things that we're going to be asking for at the next meeting is not a vote, but just, you know, if there's a desire to do this, then we need to do some more design work. But we don't want to do a lot more design work if, in fact, you know, this is not something that we're fully committed to, because it's going to be, no matter where we place it or break it down, it's going to be a significant impact on the site. We think it can be blended in aesthetically, it can work well, et cetera, but that's just our opinion. And some others that are much more well-versed in the town and the feeling in general and live here, we certainly want to respect what they think and feel.
I don't want to put an expectation that we're going to be voting on this in 2 weeks, because I think construction costs and all of that is going to play into our decision. So I think before we go too far down the path designing things, I think this committee would be prudent, and as the chair, I will not be asking for votes until we see the preliminary numbers and where we stand. So I just want the committee and the community to understand that these are all going to be part of the decision based on what we see when we do our two cost estimates. Vivian.
I was going to say the exact same, so thank you for that.
Yeah, and I think that I wasn't suggesting in the sense of, in the context of cost. We want to just make sure that, let's just assume that the town can afford this. If you don't want it anyway, then the sooner we knew that, the better. If it just feels like it's not the right thing, then we would want to know that.
I think the feeling from this committee from the outset has been to do whatever we can to get as close to net zero, and this is one way to do that. So I do think that, we have a sense that that's where we want to go, but when we start doing value engineering and making choices, this is where we will make the choice. Heidi, sorry.
No worries. I have two questions. One is on the rooftop. I've been in other districts where at times we have to have the roofs shoveled off because there's several feet of snow and the weight is too much, and that's looking really tight, and I'm not sure how that would be accomplished. And then secondly, on the parking lot canopies, how would you collect the runoff of the backside of that and/or, a foot of snow that slides off? I actually have them on my roof, so I know that happens and it comes crashing down. To get the snow removal that, might fall off the backside out of there. Can you just, I don't know if you could talk about the logistics of that?
Yeah, the parking lot canopies are generally set up, like, we don't have any that would be out in the middle of a parking lot. All of ours are proposed along the edge. And so they're generally set up to shed, like this one is, to shed the snow off of the parking area and slope off of the parking area. So our assumption is that we would be able to set, stylistically, we would be able to set something up like that. On the building roof itself, they are being proposed to leave room for them to shed snow, more for efficiency for the unit itself. You shouldn't ever be in a position where you would have to shovel snow off of these roofs as a result of some really significant modifications that have been made to the loading requirements for a roof in the Commonwealth now as a result of some of the roofs, older roofs that did fail. So these have to be designed for a significant amount of snow. It ends up being the equivalent of 8 to 10 feet of snow on the roof, just as part of the new structural code loading requirement for roofs.
Any other questions? Does that conclude your presentation this evening?
I believe that it does conclude our presentation. I just want to make sure there's no surprises at the end. Perfect.
Thank you. We have, the next item is Sustainability Committee update. We've done some of that here. John, do you want to add to that?
No, I think Scott already said we went in a little bit more detail, particularly on the lead, but we'll continue to do that. I think the big issue for us will be coming back to some of those concerns that Scott raised at the beginning that are going to come back to the building committee as a decision point. Do you want to do this or not? So we'll try to look at those next time.
Any other questions on sustainability? Okay, review and approval of invoices. Mr. Tracy sent out all the invoices, and I'll recognize Tom at this point.
Thank you. As Mr. Sears just said, that I sent them out this afternoon. We have in front of us tonight for the 3 elementary school project, we have invoices for AI3 architects through the period ending 9/30, totaling $1,624,688.84. We also have through the period of August 31st for Hill International invoices totaling $35,450. And on the high school project, we have an invoice for Compass Project Management totaling $16,790 for the period through August 31st.
Why don't we do these one at a time, Vinnie, if you could.
So, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the AI3 invoices totaling $1,624,688.84.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the invoices for Hill International of $35,450.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
And finally, where's Compass? Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve the Compass project management invoices totaling $16,790.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Before we move on, I want to recognize Vivian, because she sent out an email to me this afternoon about commissioning agents, so I'll turn it over to Vivian, and she can go over that, which we will discuss at our next meeting.
Thank you, Chairman. We were fortunate enough to have 7 firms that submitted proposals for commissioning services for the 3 elementary schools, those being Vanderwild, R.W. Sullivan, NV5, Fitzgerald and Tachi, Colliers International, Consulting Engineering Services, and EBI Consulting. We are internally in-house looking at all of the proposals, reviewing them, preparing a spreadsheet analysis, and giving the pros and cons, and will present during the next meeting. All of the proposals are available via electronic copy. If anyone so chooses to review them, I'd be more than happy to provide. I will also bring hard copies and leave them in the office here.
We will send them all out. I just wanted to review the spreadsheet, and everybody will get a complete package of these. I also want to have Vivian give us a 5-minute for the general public, what does a commissioning agent do? I think that would be very helpful. So we'll be preparing for that, because I think there's a lot of people that won't understand that role.
Yep.
So everybody will get a complete set by email. If you don't want it, let us know. And then we'll have 1 or 2 copies available here. But we will discuss this further in a couple weeks. Vivian, do you have anything additional?
No, that's all.
Scott, do you have anything additional on the elementary schools?
All set. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. High school update. Dee Dee, do you have anything?
Nothing too specific, although I would like to mention to the committee, as we are going through an MSBA process, one of the opportunities that the MSBA offers is for anyone to attend a program called Story of a School Building, which provides a day of digging deeper into the MSBA process. There's one coming up on October the 16th from 8:30 to 4:30 in Situate at the Gates Middle School. And I myself would love to go to the Story of a School Building. Just to highlight what they're talking about, they vary in terms of the presentations that they give, but this one is about the educational program updates, advanced visioning and advanced planning, fostering community and educator support for project funding and educational program changes, thinking outside the box while staying inside the MSBA space summary template, meeting challenges, security planning, systems choices, site design, budget development for professional development, building operations, and building maintenance. So as you can imagine, those are right up the alley of the superintendent, so I'm very excited to attend. But if anyone on this committee would like to go, please reach out to me, and I'll take care of the registrations.
Yes, so if anybody does from the committee would like to attend, please contact Dee Dee. The next item we have on that is an update on the contract with AI3. We do have a negotiated contract with AI3 that's being reviewed by KP Law, I'm sorry. And it's basically an MSBA contract that we really can't change a whole lot, but he's just doing a review just for the committee, and we will be voting on that as well at our next meeting. Any questions? Schedule of the next meeting would be November 6th, here in the chamber at 6 o'clock. Kelly?
Just a couple of questions, and feel free to tell me that we've already discussed it, because I know I've missed a few meetings. Just was looking, Vivian, for an update on permitting a reminder of when the CDs are going to be issued, have we talked about a procurement schedule? And then just overall, now that you're on board, looking at holistically the project budget with softs and hard costs, just to know where we stand with where we want to be. I don't think I'm still aware of what our end goal is, taking into account all of our consultant and soft costs. So it just would be nice to finally see that.
Anything else? Anyone in the public?
No meeting on the 16th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I blew this. I'm already in November. No, we do have a meeting in October.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right,
Let's go backwards. We do have a meeting on October 16th. Sorry.
And tentatively, we have the 15th, but that's less likely.
That's less likely unless something comes up with the high school.
Right.
Those third Tuesdays have been reserved for high school. As we get further down, we're going to probably need that additional meeting. We reserved them just so everybody had an idea. I would venture to say that I don't think we'll have anything on the 15th. Are there any other questions or comments? Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.